Domino Thinking presents Natural Born Speakers with your host, Allison Donaghy. If you were born to talk and want to know how to build your career around it, then Natural Born Speakers is the show for you. Now grab your seat because this is the place to be. Now here is your host, Allison.
Well, hello, everybody. How are you doing this fabulous Thursday? Unless, of course, you're listening to it on some other day of the week, in which case, I hope you're having a really great day, whatever day that happens to be. As you know, I own Domino Thinking, and I am asking people to spend at least one time a day thinking opposite to something that you already think. Today I was talking to a client, and they were looking at this really colorful room, talking about how ugly it was. And I said to them, why do you think it's ugly? And they said, well, because I really like white. And I said, is this your room? And they said, no. And I said, what about if you wait for a second before you make your judgment and think, why does this person want a really colorful room? And the reason is that some people require more stimulation than other people. So for that person in that colorful room, it is really important to them to have a lot of stimulation. That is how they feel normal. Whereas the person I was talking to, that was overstimulation in the white room was what made them feel normal. So what is ugly to one person is not necessarily ugly to another. And maybe we just need to take a second before we make those statements and think about it from the other point of view. Just something to think about. Here we are today with my guest. Her name is Dale, and Dale is super interesting. I'm excited to have her here. Well, I'm so impressed with this. I even stumble over as I'm reading it. She has run 9 full marathons. This is somebody, me, who really likes to park close to the door. So the whole running of the marathon thing, I think, is pretty wow. Certainly not in my wheelhouse, and I'm super impressed with people who do it. But she knows that running marathons is like managing human capital. You have to have a vision, you have to create the roadmap, and then you have to provide the fuel to get the job done. She has been more than 15 years as a professional in the pharmaceutical industry, and she now works with business professionals and leaders who want to know thinking like a marathoner and solving the people puzzle, how it can help them achieve audacious results. She speaks and delivers programs on communication and leadership. Welcome, Dale.
Thank you very much, Allison. It's fun to be doing it today.
Well, thanks. It's good to have you here.
Great. And hello to everybody out there, wherever you are.
Out in radio land or podcast land, depending on when they're listening. Yes.
Yeah, pardon me. You made a comment about thinking differently. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because as you were sharing that with everybody, I was thinking of just last night I was delivering a presentation to the Business Professional Women's Network in Langley out here, and we were talking about how people hear things differently. And it's also our own perspective, right? So we see or we speak in a certain way. It's because that's who we are, and oftentimes we fail to understand that somebody doesn't think or communicate in the same way. So our words that we say to them can be misinterpreted when we don't even intend that.
Yes. It's super relevant. And the irony is I was at a meeting this morning, and that was one of the topics where when we say something, especially when we rush in with information without explaining why we need the information, then the person on the receiving end, their brain starts spinning about, why is that person asking me this? And all of their stuff comes up. The example they gave was a hairdresser. If you sit down in a hairdresser's chair and they say, well, what do you do for a living? The person sitting in the chair is like, what does that matter? Because are you going to charge me more? Are you expecting a big tip? And then all of their behavior going forward reflects those thoughts that they're having, where the hairdresser, they just wanted to know what kind of haircut would be suitable. And if they started by saying, hey, lots of things go into a haircut and a new look, and I know you're wanting a new look, let's start with what you do for a living so I know what would be suitable. Totally different perception for that person in the chair.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when we
just don't think about it.
We don't. And if we take that second to think about what's going on in the person's head in front of us, wow, there's so many problems that could we could end world hunger. We could stop wars because we'd be actually taking into consideration what was happening and cut down miscommunication.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yes, well, I could probably talk about that for hours, and this isn't about me. This is about you. So 9 marathons? Okay, actually, let's back. I do want to ask that question. What, 9 marathons?
Yes.
Holy, when did you start?
Nice. Yeah, there we go. Now you're going to ask me my age, right? Okay.
No.
We won't say how many years ago it was, but the year I turned 45. That was a birthday. That was a birthday gift to myself. Believe it or not.
Wow, that is
that's
super
ways of celebrating my birthday, and it was just something. My husband and I had been running, but nothing like this, no races or anything, and I just got it into my head that I'd like to achieve something this year. I'm turning 45, and that was my challenge to myself, and a way of achieving something that I had never done before.
Right. And then you thought, hey, this was fun. Let's do it 8 more times.
Yeah, it was right after the event. Like, honestly, when I finished the first one, I was on cloud 9. I just felt so fabulous. Well, until, about half an hour later. And then I decided, oh, this hurts. But you have I had such a sense of accomplishment that I set out to do something like that, which I'd never done before. And it was just like, oh my God, I've done something that 1% of the population does. Even though there's tons and tons of people doing distance running and triathlons and Ironmans, it's still a very, very small percentage of the population that actually does anything like this. So but the reason I wanted to do others was because, yes, I did enjoy it. I did enjoy the challenge. But with each one, I just wanted to get a little faster. Right. So that was a challenge for myself.
Oh, nice. So you just wanted to keep up in the ante.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. But then you take it that step further. Okay, I want to know what it is that you do and how did you get from there to here? And then I'm going to start with all the other questions.
Okay. So what I do is basically what you were talking about in the beginning, in the introduction. I work with companies on team productivity and communications. And leadership is part of that as well. But I use a number of different tools, and I get involved with personalities and personality styles, which is, when we're talking about communication, that's actually what it is. It's like, how do we communicate? Because this is who we are. And it's not about changing anybody and not about changing the world. It's just, how can we adapt to somebody else's personality style? So I go by the philosophy of, I'm sure you've heard of the golden rule, which says, treat others as you want to be treated. But there's something out there, and I believe the phrase was coined by Tony D'Alessandro, is the platinum rule. And the platinum rule says that to treat others as they want to be treated. Right.
That really takes the ego out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, and why not? So if I understand you, Allison, and I understand how you like to communicate, I can then even if that's not my style, I can communicate with you in that way, in your way, so that now we understand each other better and there's a lot less conflict. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing that I do. But continuing on to that, I do a leadership aspect in relation to how are we as leaders in our uniqueness and our personality styles, and how do we lead that way. And then I get involved with emotional intelligence, which sometimes is a nasty word in business because I think it's a lot of fluff, but it's really not. It's all about using our emotions. How do we use our emotions in decision making, problem solving, and interacting with others?
Mm-hmm.
And business is really all about that. So,
well, because business is personal. Like, I know a lot of people don't want to think it is, but we are people, we are persons in business, and we're bringing all of our human qualities in. So to me, it makes absolute sense that you'd want to understand that.
Absolutely. And you know, it's out there and many do. I like to use the example of Southwest Airlines because from all of the articles that I've read with them, they hire people based on their interpersonal skills.
Right.
And then they train them in the technical aspects.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's what makes them, one of the reasons it makes them so successful.
Right. I feel the same way about G Adventures. And I like it because they're Canadian. Have you heard of them?
I haven't, but I'm going to look them up after.
Yeah, Bruce owns it, and he actually revolutionized adventure travel. And it may be one of those things that you'd find really interesting. And he wrote a book called Looptail. And it talks about his vision for the company and how he just kept working towards that vision and kept bringing in people who supported that vision and empowering them. And any time I go into a G Adventure store, the people are so in love with their jobs. And I just want to start working for this company because I want to, be a part of that, where the people are just so in love with what they're doing and they feel so empowered when they're doing it. And and you're in Vancouver too. You could go, and I think they've got a store just over the bridge off Granville. Burrard, 4th and Burrard, I think. And they have one up there, and they are just delightful people. If you're ever having a bad day, just go on in there. But it's that it's that valuing more than just that skill that people bring. Exactly. And Southwest definitely does that.
Now you did ask me how I got to where I am.
Yes.
That is what I do.
Do tell.
That's what I do. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned in the beginning, I was in the pharmaceutical industry for over 16 years. And it was, I guess, the last 5 years that I don't know. I still liked my job. I had the opportunity to work with many different kinds of people, but I really loved my suppliers because they were absolute wonderful people to deal with.
Right.
Just absolutely wonderful. In the last 5 years, I started feeling like every time I went into work in the morning, it was like, oh, okay. I still liked my job. Got very well paid, and I was literally 5 minutes from home.
Wow!
No traffic.
Not everybody can boast that.
No, from my driveway to the company parking lot, 5 minutes. No traffic except a few stop signs.
Nice.
And great benefits. So why am I kind of not happy? Mm-hmm. But hey, it was a great job, so didn't really plan on going anywhere. It was in 2000, around the end of 2005, 2006, this is a branch of a U.S. company, but it was the Canadian subsidiary. We did all of our work pretty much from we didn't have that much input from the Americans, but then they decided to get themselves involved a little bit more and one of the issues was they decided at that time, 2005, 2006, to downsize.
Right.
And I was there 16 years, right? I was a long-term employee. The problem was that when they were, it was 1/3 of the workforce that was actually let go.
Wow.
And
that's massive.
We had like 1,300 employees on site. And it was, they gave pensions to a lot of people, but there were also people like myself who hadn't been, compared to other people in the organization, 16 years wasn't a long time.
Right.
And yes, it was based on seniority, but based on seniority within a certain salary range.
Mm-hmm.
Now, which if you're, you run the company, you're in the finance department, obviously you're going to take the people within the salary range where you're spending the most money.
Right.
So I have to tell you, like, half of me was happy and half of me was like really ticked off because why me? The why me story. But it honestly turned out to be the best thing that happened, because from there I started to dabble in personal training, which I had always done part-time and liked it. Mm-hmm. But working for a gym was just not where I needed to be. I left there and I went to the Dale Carnegie organization. Most people have heard of Dale Carnegie.
Yes, sure have.
A lot of friends and influence people.
That's right. Fantastic.
There for 4 years. Yeah, I stayed there for 4 years. And I was in Quebec at the time. That's where I was born and raised. Their business was not doing as well as it could as the rest of the country. And it was very frustrating to me that they had to cancel classes, and I felt that, I needed to move on and do something on my own. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I became one of their trainers. It was a great experience, but it was time for me to move on. And so I decided in July 2012 that, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. And then, of course, in the beginning of 2013, we decided to move all across the country and come out to this beautiful province here. So that's how I got into it. Things evolved over time, and now I found my sweet spot.
Right. Well, and it's so cool how, often we look at people and we think, oh, they're so successful and look at what they're doing. And we never think about all of the time and effort and training and learning and blood, sweat, and tears that happens before we see them being remarkable.
You're absolutely right. Talking about,
and we do it with everything.
Yeah.
Right. We watch a basketball player make a 3-point shot and we're like, whoa, that's so easy. I could do that. Look how easy and good it looks. And then you try and you're like, yeah, I kind of look like a dead fish out here.
Well, it's a little bit like the movie The Secret.
Yes.
And, they were always saying how when you just think about it, you visualize and it happens. And I'm going, no, it doesn't. And yourself, it takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
The whole
and it takes
thing,
that training of watching too, those those little signs, those little flag posts that says you're going the right way. And if you miss a couple, then you flounder and you stumble, and eventually you can get better, I think, at looking for the markers that you're doing it right or you're going the right direction. But that doesn't come easy either.
Allison, it sounds like you've known me for a long time.
Two peas in a pod.
Oh, gosh, you just hit the nail on the head. Yeah. I cannot tell you, my husband would tell you the same thing, how many times I said, I quit. I'm not doing this. It's too hard. I'm going nowhere. But I never gave up.
Well, and we were, thank God, because we were just talking before the show started about how busy you are.
Yes, it comes.
Yes.
It comes as long as you don't quit. There's many stories out there about the gold mine. I think it was the diamond mine, and they sold the land, and then the people who bought the land hit the jackpot, and it happens.
Yes.
It's just a question of being patient.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not one of my best qualities.
I know either. You're ripping a page out of my book now.
Yeah, but I just couldn't give up because I figured, I believed that it was something that I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it pays off.
Yeah. Right. It does. It does. Especially like when we were talking and you said that it doesn't even feel like work. They're having so much fun with it. And that's probably one of the biggest personal payoffs, is that you get to wake up in the morning without dreading your day. And then the bonus is that you get to make a difference.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it's those times, I'm sure that you know as well, or anybody else out there who wants to make a difference in people's lives. And you know what? You don't always, what is it? Dale Carnegie says, expect ingratitude.
Mm.
And too often we don't know the changes that we've made in people's lives.
No.
I remember when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, and I had somebody working with me at the time, and she was a very busy lady, and she had a couple of kids, and we would talk, and she knew that I ran marathons, and I think she maybe was there when I decided to go off on another track and do bodybuilding, even though I'm only 5 foot. And I met her again when I was working with Dale Carnegie, and we had a conversation. She says, we got to do lunch. So she picks me up, go for lunch, and she says, I have to tell you that you made a difference in my life, because I was at a point where she had a lot of problems with her last pregnancy, and she was a very tiny person too. She was overweight. She was unhealthy. And she said, I remembered you talking about going to the gym and working out and running your marathons. And she said, I hired a personal trainer. And
wow.
She looked amazing. And she hired a personal trainer. She did, changed her eating habits around. And that's when I realized that I made a difference in people's lives, even though I don't realize it sometimes.
And that is so true. Well, and you had said something earlier too that kind of stuck in my head. You had said that when we are adapting to other people's styles, that, we're not going to change the world, but I think we do change the world a little bit at a time, because you went about communicating in a way that other people could hear you. And then this woman has changed her entire life because of something you had said in without knowing, because you were speaking her language. And how many lives has she now changed? And so we do change the world. You did change the world.
Exactly. We all do. We just don't sometimes know it. There are people out there, as we know, who they're popular. They've got a big name, and that's wonderful. We forget that those of us who don't have the big name, who people, not everybody knows our name, that we still make a positive difference in the world.
For sure. And I think sometimes we make a bigger impact in certain ways because we are actually coming in contact with each other. So it's great to be able to turn on a TV and hear Oprah talk. But it's still, you have that TV between her and us, or her and me. But when I'm out there in the real world and I actually bump up against a real live human being, not that Oprah's not live, because I'm pretty sure last time I checked, she's still alive.
Well, very.
When that person is right in front of you, that impact, it brings so much. It has that energy, it has that emotion, it's tangible. And I think on this lower level of stardom, we do have mass capacity to change and to impact. And if we started to behave as if that were true, the impact would just increase massively.
And I think you said behave as if it was true. And I agree with you. I also, for myself, feel it's the hardest thing to do.
Really? Because you seem so genuine. And this isn't the first time I've talked to you. And I think you, just by showing up as you, is already behaving as if you make a difference.
I guess we just don't see ourselves in the same way as other people see us. Maybe that's it. We just
words.
We don't see ourselves obviously the way other people see us. It's funny because I'm a very petite person. Mm-hmm. I don't give that impression apparently with my photo on my LinkedIn page. I've had several people say, "You look a lot bigger than you really are." It's just a headshot, right? I don't know why.
I can always tell people's height by their headshot.
But I several times when I'm speaking, people have come up to me and said, you're just so much bigger when you're up there speaking, and they don't mean it in a sense of size, obviously. Mm-hmm. But it's just like, oh, am I really? And I said, well, thank you, because it's just something I don't see myself, because I can't see myself where they're sitting, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same for us. It's true. We don't see ourselves from other people's point of view.
Right. And what a travesty that is, because people probably see us so much better than we see ourselves in so many ways. What's that?
We beat ourselves up a lot. Yeah, we beat ourselves up a lot.
I know. I said to a woman the other day, I said that she was sweet, and she started laughing, and she goes, "That's not the first time you've said that to me." She goes, "But all of the words in the entire English language, that is the least likely word I would pick to describe myself. Like, I'm a lot of things, but sweet isn't one of them." And I went, wow. Really? Because I think she is very sweet in a lot of occasions, and it is interesting. I was actually at the Archangel Summit. Have you heard of it in Toronto?
I think I have.
It was its first year this year. Seth Godin was there, Gary Vee, Robin Sharma. It was an incredible event, and all of the proceeds went to angel investing. So super great project that they have going there. But when I saw the speakers on the floor, they were all a lot smaller than I thought they were when they were on the stage. So it's funny that, I'm obviously not the only one with that perception.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super cool. I love it. And I love, again, I could probably spend all day just talking about that impact that we make in ways. Like, I just wrote a book. I think we were talking about that earlier, and it's called Change Your Business, Change the World. And a friend of mine who's a business owner said to me, "I really want to review your book, but I'm not quite sure how to do that and have it make sense." And I went, "Okay, like, what happened?" And she said, "Well, your book changed the way I communicate with my son." And I went,
wow.
What? And she goes, "Yes." She said, "I think I follow the rules. I do everything I'm supposed to do, and I think my children should do the same. And my daughter's very good at that. My son bucks the rules all the time, and I realize now that he's a domino thinker. And your book made that clear to me, and our relationship has improved so much. I've changed the way I'm parenting him." And I went, "You got that from my book?" It is, and I went back and I read my book and I'm like, how did she get that? Like I'm still baffled. I think it's super cool, but yeah, I didn't talk about parenting, I don't think, once in that whole book, and I have no idea where it came from, but it's really quite fascinating. And I'm sure doing what you do, you're impacting, and then you're allowing other people to impact as well.
Yes. I mean, I hear what you're saying about the book. I wrote a book a couple of years ago as well, and it was my first book, and I really had no idea where I was going with it. But it turned out to be quite interesting. It's called "Excuse Me, I'm Being Audacious," and it's about owning your leadership. So it's about personal leadership and embracing that personal leadership, because that's something I totally believe in. That we have to be able to lead ourselves before we can lead anybody else. And I had sent a copy to a colleague of mine back in Montreal. Now I do bring a little bit of the personality styles into it, because it's applicable. There's two pieces. There's the business aspect, there's the personal aspect, stories from people who all over the country. And I've tied that into the personality profiles, but I've also tied it in a business example. So we can do it, we can embrace that, our own leadership, not only in our business lives, but in our personal lives as well. And he used the information from the book he used to explain a concept to a group of, to a company that he was working with. And he said, they just got it. It was very simple. And he had no training in any of this, but he was able to read the book and figure it out and explain it to these people in a way that they just got it. So you're right, that oftentimes something will come out of our written word or our spoken word that we don't think. It doesn't make sense when somebody says it changed this for me. It just doesn't make sense to us, but it makes perfect sense to them.
Yeah. And it's along the same lines that if your mother says something to you, you're like, yeah, right, Mom. And then some stranger down the street in the grocery store says it, and you're like, oh, that person was brilliant. Then you go back and you tell your mom, guess what I just learned? And she's like, yeah, I've been telling you that for years. And you're like, oh, so you're brilliant too. Yeah, and sometimes when we get that information on some random Tuesday, it just sounds better than it did on a random Friday.
Exactly, because we're ready to hear the message at that time.
Yeah. So it's important to just keep talking, right?
I was just going to say that. Yes. There are times where I've heard things over and over, as you pointed out, moms or anywhere else, same information, but I hear it from somebody different, and it's at a different point in life. And it's like, oh, I get it now.
Right. Yeah. It's remarkable how that works. And to try to identify why it was acceptable one time and not on another time, it's almost impossible. If we even remember the times it was exposed to us before. But okay, so I'm still kind of boggled by this 9 marathon thing, because I'm a little in awe. But okay, so you took that, getting back on track and back on talking about you, you took that and you really paralleled it to business. So how did you reach that epiphany or realization or whatever you want to call it? Like, how did you turn marathoning into a business concept?
It was a long process. But I realized that a lot of the lessons, and I'll call them lessons, that I learned from running marathons are very similar to things that happen in business. I'm still working on this. I'm still in the process of redoing a keynote that really points it out. Now, first of all, when you're running marathons, you need focus. If you don't focus, I mean, when you're doing long runs out there and you're running for 3 hours and it's not a race, you need focus. And that's one thing that I fortunately, I was very good at. Now, I was very good at running. I'm not always very good at it at other things. But I've learned to draw from that. So in a business, whatever it is that we're doing in business, whether it's our business or whether, we're a manager in a department, we have to have focus. And when I say focus, I always believe we should be focusing on our people. We've been talking about people this whole time. It's not just the running, because that's part of running the business. If a business doesn't pay attention to their people, their profits are going to go down because it's your people that are giving you the results. It's not a machine.
Right.
So focusing on the people and, well, how do I keep my people happy? How do I keep them, I keep them, I guess abreast of all the things that make them better as employees, make better teams. And then I'm thinking, well, okay, you have to have some kind of endurance if you're going to run 42 kilometers.
God.
For people who are not on the metric system, it's 26 miles. And I'll say 26.1 because the 0.1 is really important.
God, I'm sometimes resentful if I have to drive that far.
0.1 really, really counts. And it's kind of like, I think I measured it. It's like running from where I live into Richmond to the airport, okay? So it's far enough. It's far enough. And you need to have endurance. You need endurance in business. You need the endurance to get through the tough spots when things aren't going the way you want them to go. Whether it's a business that's a large company or it's just you. We talked about that earlier. How do we stay in the game when it's tough? Because I have to tell you, there were times I only wanted to quit a marathon once. And I didn't even know that it was like 3 kilometers to the finish line.
Wow.
Which is not very far in terms of running 42.2.
Not really.
But it was, it was tough. It was really, really tough. And that was the year, it was in Maui. And I wanted to, I believed I was ready to qualify for Boston. And I got to the halfway point and thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it. So I looked at my watch and said, I'm only at that time, it was a couple of minutes. I was just a couple of minutes behind my scheduled time at the halfway point. So I can do this. But at that point, it had got to like over 80 degrees. There was no breeze. It was full sunshine, and you'd think that running along the ocean would be cool. Well, it wasn't.
Oh, no.
And I got to Lahaina was about 3 kilometers before the finish line, which was basically in front of our hotel. And I was so hot. I was running out of oxygen. My legs felt like, somebody had encased my legs in concrete. And I looked at my time and I said, you know what? What's the point? I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make my time. That was the key for me, was making my time.
Oh.
Very determined.
Yes.
And I wanted to make my time because I didn't want to run Boston, but I wanted to make the time to qualify. And I actually said out loud, I quit. I just quit.
Mm.
And when they give the results in a marathon, they show the time, right? And if you don't make your time, you don't complete the race, they show DNF or did not finish.
Oh.
And
that's a little deflating.
I saw that in my mind's eye, and I said, okay, you can't have that. And I kept going. So it took me 5 hours and 9 minutes.
Oh.
Finished the race.
Yeah.
But I did not quit.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to have endurance.
Right.
And in business, when things seem that everything's going wrong, you have to have that endurance to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part, I mean, there's many, many more aspects of it, but the third part is how resilient are you? How resilient are you with coming back? And then going out a couple of years later and running another one, even though I was extremely disappointed, that took me 5 hours and 9 minutes. But I did. I went out there and did it again because I was able to bounce back. So how do we, as leaders and managers, bounce back from the disappointments? And bounce back for, hey, I kind of screwed up. I didn't complete the project on time, so the company lost money. How do we bounce back from that in the business?
Right.
And how do we, I've got so many stories. I could be on here for hours.
We could arrange that.
Helping somebody finish the race. It was in Las Vegas. I was looking for somebody to help me finish the race.
Right.
I connected with a young woman, and she said, I said, so, how are you doing? She says, oh, I'm okay, but she says, it's really hard. And I said, she says, this is my first marathon. My boyfriend's finished, and I'm not sure I can make it to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I put my goal aside and said, you know what? I've got to help her get in. So the reward for me that day was not the medal.
Right.
It was her, when she said to her boyfriend, she helped me finish. She didn't even know my name, but that was my reward. So as leaders, then, it's about practicing servant leadership. How do we put some of our own personal goals aside to help others achieve their goals?
Right.
And building teams. Who do we put on the team that can take us up the hill when we have a roadblock? Who do we want at the bottom of the hill to support the rest of the team? Because if you put a very helpful, supportive person to run up a hill, they're not going to make it. They'll quit.
No.
We want them at the bottom. So there's just so many ways that we can tie the lessons and the just different aspects of running marathons that we can tie into business.
Yeah, that's it's so interesting. It's quite fascinating with how we can run these parallels. And I think sometimes the beautiful part of running these parallels is it takes the personal failure or emotion out of it. Because we're looking at a scenario and then comparing it against another scenario, and we're able to step back, I think, and see it a bit more clearly, and just as a task or something to accomplish or to look at differently or to make changes around, as opposed to having to say, oh yeah, I sucked at that and I failed at that. It so beautifully eliminates it all.
After a while, for me personally, after a while, we can still be, I'll still beat myself up, but I've learned that lesson. I've learned that I have to let it go. Because during the Maui race, we also made it into vacation, and I had a guided meditation, and the person that was doing it, we were talking about the race during the meditation and how disappointed I was that I didn't make my time. And he said, why can't you forgive yourself? And I'm still getting goosebumps here. Because that was a big lesson for me to learn. Okay, yes, I messed up. In my mind, I messed up. I didn't make the time that I wanted. But I had to learn that, okay, so you didn't make it this time. Forgive yourself and move on. And I believe that if I hadn't learned that lesson, you and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to each other, because I'd be off doing something else.
Yeah.
Working with somebody else or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny how what we perceive as our failure is actually the seed of our next magnificent thing. Yeah. Wow. I had a guest on the show earlier this year, and she talked about how she was in I think it was in a bike race in, where is she, New Zealand. And it was horrible weather, the worst she'd ever seen. Like the rain was coming in sideways, and she did her first lap, and she was just like, I can't do this. And her husband was there saying, yes, you can. And she was about to give up. But she ended up placing second, even though it took her 100 years to finish it, because other people just didn't bother completing.
Wow.
Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that is such a powerful story about how when we give up, we don't know what's going to be at the end, because we're not going to be there to see it. Exactly. And all of those other people, even if one other person hadn't given up, or two other people hadn't given up, she wouldn't have placed. She was that slow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great story.
And inspiring, just like yours, just like that. Yeah. Doesn't matter. I have to finish. I have to do this. It matters.
Yes, even if, I did run in slowly. I have to tell you, that last bit was a lot of walking. But when I hear the crowds, and anybody who's doing it, if you're doing something like this, it's when you as an individual hear the crowds clapping and cheering for you as they were for me. And they didn't know my name. I was a number, right? But, they were standing there clapping and cheering for everybody who came in. And I always leave the last 500 meters to run in, because it makes me feel really good. Hey, I can believe it, I ran in. And, it's like everything else in life. We tend to have that. If you just hang in a little bit longer, people, you're going to bring up that energy to finish the same way I did in that race. You can't help it.
Yeah. Well, okay. So let's play devil's advocate here for a second. Like, there are times that people, like we talked about the diamond land, and, you sell off the land and somebody else buys it and they find diamonds. But then there's the people who never sold the land and never found diamonds. So I think it would be a disservice here if we didn't actually talk about that flip side of maybe there's a time when you do just say, okay, I'm done, and I'm going to stop, and you sell off the land. What's the difference? What would you tell somebody when they're on sort of that cusp of, I just want to quit. I'm done. I quit. I've been working at this for years. It's not working. I'm not have the life I want. I'm stressed out. How do people know whether or not they should just continue and hope they're going to find diamonds? Or do they just say, I'm just going to sell and cut my losses?
I believe that we go through things for certain reasons. Mm-hmm. And that it may not be the diamonds at the end that's the goal or the lesson. And there may be something bigger for those individuals, because sometimes it just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. But there may be something bigger out there for those individuals to do that as a bigger purpose for them that they haven't found yet.
Right.
And I think intuitively we know when to quit.
You think?
And say, hey, you know, maybe that's not it at all. Maybe there's something else out there for me that I'm part of a even bigger picture that I don't know yet. And that's part of their journey.
Right.
So quitting doesn't mean, I guess quitting doesn't mean that you're not useful.
Mm-hmm.
But quitting for those individuals may just mean that I've got to find something that really is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Yeah, and thank you for that. Because I spend a lot of time, most things I measure is I should try this. And then I think, I don't want to try that. And then I think, am I going to regret it when I'm 80 that I didn't try it? And then I'm like, oh yeah, probably I should try it. So my measuring stick for everything is deciding on whether or not I'm going to regret doing or not doing something. And sometimes I will go, yeah, I can die happy having never tried that. That's great. And then I have those times that I do something and I think, oh my God, why did I do that? And I remind myself, well, if I hadn't, I would have regretted it at 80. But then there's those sort of murky times when it's hard to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like when it's clear cut, I'm going to regret this, I'm not going to regret this, nice and easy. But when those things gets gray and we start to doubt ourselves, I think that's when it becomes so challenging because the path isn't clear.
And I agree with you on that. I remember my mother. I have a nephew out here, and he moved from Montreal and drove to California because he wanted to be in the film industry. Now lives in Vancouver and actually does a lot of film work. And my mother couldn't figure out why. She thought he was making a mistake. And I said to her, but you have to let him try it. He has to try it. And if he fails, he fails.
Mm-hmm.
And I also agree with you that sometimes it's hard to make that choice. And thinking about, well, will I or will I not regret it? Yes. But I still think, okay, so try it. You know, if it's something you really, really, really believe that you want, then it's an easy decision. Mm-hmm. Running a marathon was like, okay, for somebody else, it's not going to be, okay, I can live without that.
I don't think I'm going to be 80 looking back on my life going, damn, I should have run a marathon. Right?
It was something I just wanted to challenge myself with. But I was determined to cross the finish line no matter what.
Right.
And I did. So it's just like, how much does it mean to us to try that, I guess.
Right. Yeah. And I think we often think it's an all or nothing. And sometimes we can take a break and come back clear. Like leaving doesn't necessarily mean forever in most situations.
And failure is not a bad thing. If we try it and fail, so what? We've tried it.
I read this book about Iceland. It was actually called Bliss, something Bliss or Bliss something. And it was about this guy who he's a writer and he is unhappy, chronically unhappy. And he's unhappy about being unhappy. And there's actually a term for it. I forget what it's called. So he thought he would go on this pursuit to try to find and understand happiness. And so he went to the happiness factory in Europe and he started studying the happiest countries on earth and the most unhappy. And then he set out to visit them. And one of the places he went to was Iceland. And one of the reasons that he thought the people in Iceland were happy is one, there's a very creative outlet there. But the other thing is their relationship with failure isn't the same. So if you were a lawyer and after 2 years of practicing law or 10 years or whatever, you went, I'm over it. I think I want to open a coffee shop. Nobody says, what do you mean you're a lawyer and now you're opening a coffee shop? Everybody's like, good job, right? So their relationship, they don't see failure the way that we have villainized it. Vilified it. I just make up words.
Okay, I like that word. Yeah, I mean, if we can learn to learn from our failures, then that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and accept the fact that sometimes we just change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I never used to like white walls, and now I do.
And if you told me when I was 10 years old, wanted to be a ballet teacher, that I would be doing this, I would have told you were crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It is funny where we end up, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of fun that we can't predict it. I think it's, sometimes it's tiring and it's frustrating and you want to kind of pull your hair out. But I think it's kind of cool that we don't know.
That's the whole plan, right?
That's right.
We are not supposed to know.
Yes. Well, we are winding down here a little bit. We got 5 minutes left. So I want to do some, how do people connect with you?
They can go to my website is Dale, D-A-L-E, Choquette, CHOQUETTE.com. And my email address is dale@dalechoquette.com.
Brilliant. And what kind of people would come looking for you?
That's a very good question because I get all kinds of people looking for me.
That's because you're fabulous.
Yeah, because I do public workshops as well. So people who are looking to be certified in as human behavior consultants would connect with me. People who are looking to just be better communicators would connect with me. And of course, organizations who want to build teams and improve their communication skills would be the people who are looking for me.
Okay. Yeah, sounds great. And they can find you. And I think they're going to be really happy when they do.
That's always the plan.
That's always the plan. So your final fun. And it's good. It's important. It doesn't always have to be work, right?
That's right.
Yes. So final words. What's your last parting message here?
Know who you are as an individual. Use it the way it's meant to be, and follow the platinum rule and treat others as they want to be treated. And your relationships will, whether they're business or personal, will just bloom. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. I love it. But sometimes I think people want to be treated like they're assholes. What do we do with those people?
I hear that one too, and not from my personal experience, but from what other people have done. Give it right back to them. It can be a challenge for many people.
Yeah. Well, that is one of the things that makes you great. I love it. Thank you so much for being a guest on this show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.
Thanks. Until next Thursday, speak up because you have something to say and I want to hear it.
Thanks for hanging out with Natural Born Speakers. But don't stop now. Contact Allison with questions to be a guest or hire her as a speaker. Go to dominothinking.com. See you same place and time next week.